Just decide to make an upgrade. Welcome back to another episode of the Upgrade My Classroom podcast. My name is Kevin McKellar, the host, and this is the show where we teach proactive mental health and personal development strategies for teens so that teachers and education professionals can come in, take a listen, learn, and go upgrade their classroom and ultimately teach these students the necessary frameworks, decision-making frameworks, routine buildings, social strategies to become more aware of themselves, aware how they affect others, and just how to possibly deal with anxiety. And today, that's exactly what we're going to talk about. I had the pleasure to interview Brittany Richmond, and Brittany is a teen youth speaker and an expert in anxiety. And she really taught a lot of different ways we can look at how students are dealing with anxiety and how to actually cope with them and certain tactics to actually help them manage them and live with it. Because I don't think it's one of these things that we actually get over. I think it's a process that we continue to get better and hone and manage as we run through our lives. So we talk a lot about some of the things that teenagers today are dealing with. We're talking about people pleasing and unrealistic expectations that students have as they communicate with each other. More importantly, in the digital world, because remember, teens now are living as much of their life in the real world as they are in the digital world. And, you know, I myself am just old enough to not really know exactly what they're dealing with, but just young enough to kind of have an idea, and ultimately we talk about situations of not responding to texts, not responding to messages on Snapchat. And are we affected by that? How does it make us feel? Really interesting conversations. We also talk about how to actually deal with that by setting boundaries for ourselves and others and being able to communicate those boundaries effectively. And we also talk about the stigma that is still surrounding mental health and how, unfortunately, that stigma, I believe, kills the communication that we want to have with our students. So Brittany shares some really interesting ways that we can foster some communication. So without further ado, let's get into my conversation with Brittany Richmond. Brittany, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, this is really cool. I'm really, really excited to dig into kind of what it is that you do and how you help teens through many different ways. But before we do, I'll give you kind of the floor here to introduce yourself. Tell us kind of who you are and what you do and what you're all about.
Well, I'm terrible at talking about myself. Absolutely causes me so much anxiety. I'm working on it, though. This is like every podcast I'm on, I say that. The spotlight is on you right now. No pressure. Yikes. Okay. Well, I never know what to say. I'm like, do I say my age? Do I say that? What do I say? Is this like a resume? I don't interview. I don't know.
Yes,
okay.
And if you do poorly, you don't get the job. Sorry.
Right. Exactly. So it was a lot of pressure. Well, okay, some highlights, I guess, of me. I am a professional speaker. I am a mental health speaker for teens, specifically on overcoming anxiety. I'm a former school counselor, so I've been in the school system for a long time. I used, varsity volleyball coach. I've done like all the things, and I am 36, and I do want to put that context out there just because I have, I've seen a lot and gone through a lot, and I got into professional speaking, living with my own mental health struggles that I have chosen to live out loud to help other people with, and including the teenagers, because that's when it was really, really hard for me. And I'm going to do a little fun fact about me.
Yes.
Fun fact about me is we talked about this before the recording, so I'm just going to say I love 80s hair bands. So I feel like that's just a fun fact about me. So
that is probably the funnest fact. That's probably the funnest fact we're going to hear on this podcast from a guest. So very cool. And
well, I hope when people hear it, they go on their Spotify and just search for 80s hair bands and just jam out the rest of the day. That's what we want.
It's literally, it's like such good feel good music. Like you can't be upset when you're listening to
Exactly.
Oh gosh, 80s hair bands. Love it. I love that that's the title. Well, Brittany, thank you again for jumping on. I want to dig into a little bit about. Let's kind of start where you started. So you started your career as a school counselor.
Okay.
What grade level were you teaching or were working with? How long were you doing that? And tell us a little bit about kind of what that experience was like for you.
Okay. So, we have to go back a little bit then because I got my bachelor's and my master's when the crash in 2008, 2008 was happening. So,
sorry to cut you off. We are by the way, the same exact. I'm 1 year younger than me, so I know exactly what you're going through.
Okay, so just to put in context, I was not a school counselor right after school.
Right.
I didn't get a job. So that was the thing. So, actually, and that was in the height of when, my anxiety and depression was at its worst. So when you combine that with working 3 jobs just to survive, and I was bartending, I was working at a machine shop, and I was helping my mom on the side with her stuff. I mean, it was just a really, really awful time in my life. And that, and I think at the time I felt like, especially in the field of psychology, if you don't have a master's, you can't really do anything. It's even hard with a master's to do a lot of things in that field of counseling and psychology, because a lot of times you either have to go get certified in, school counseling or private counseling or whatever, or you have to go on and get your doctorate to really do anything. But so of course, you're dealing with that kind of like a mental, like, do I go back to school? Do I, like all the things. So I went into sales for a while, which I have done off and on throughout my 36-year life, in different capacities, including now, my own business. You have to market yourself. So there is, selling yourself to products and services as a speaker or a coach, but I got into counseling about 6 years ago, finally got into counseling. And I was actually working, my first school counseling job was at a school of kids with special needs from kindergarten all the way up to 21 years old. So a lot of life skills, was a lot of things that I worked with too, and like behavior modification strategies and things like that. And then I've worked in high schools, middle schools, I've worked in primary schools. So I've seen a lot of different, things throughout my life. And actually when COVID hit, like right when it hit, when schools went virtual is when I quit and I went into speaking and coaching full-time for speakers. So, I was like, this is just my way out. I'm out.
Yes,
I'm done.
yes.
I'm done dealing with this. I gotta go bigger scale, because I did not like the idea of counseling kids via computer. That really bugged me. Something about that just didn't sit right with me from my perspective. Now, I love companies like, I'm going to plug betterhealth.com because they do a lot of online counseling and therapy, and I absolutely love them.
Sure.
But for some reason, the kids were struggling, we were struggling, no one knew what was going on. So it just felt like I need to do something on a larger scale now, is what it kind of felt like. So thank you.
So, with that being said, what were some of the other, I'm assuming, see, I was not in education at that time. I was in education, formal education, a long time ago. So I had the exact opposite, where I kind of started right out of college, luckily enough. And then that's when my realization was like, okay, I need to do other things, and I need to, if I'm going to find a teaching job, it's got to be somewhere I can see myself staying for the rest of my life. And I've got to, there was something way deep down. It took me a long time to figure out that I needed to work with kids, but needed to, as you said, reach just that many more kids. So with that being said, you had a lot of, it was a difficult time with COVID, as we all have dealt with, every human being, child, adult, What were some of the other teachers dealing with during that time? I mean, we could obviously assume what they were dealing with and why it was stressful, but shed some light on that. Like, what were they dealing with that was so stressful about, people that are not in the education field? What's the big deal? You don't even have to go to work anymore. You get to teach online. It's great.
Well, I had a very firsthand experience because my husband is a teacher. He teaches high school math and driver's ed. So imagine teaching driver's ed, driving in a car, and you can't because you have to be socially distanced. Is just unreal.
Totally fine. Why have to drive a car to teach it? Sure.
But I think teaching profession, it it just was just a struggle when nobody had any answers. I think like when you're in a profession where, if you want to speak metaphorically, you have all the answers for your students, you know, you're teaching them, you're educating them. But this is something that we had no knowledge of, no education of. And yes, everyone, it's so easy to say now, you know, being, you know, the Monday morning quarterback, you know, hindsight is 2020. I'm sure we all could have done different things. And now we're experts at Zoom and all these different, I don't even know what we're on right now. Never heard of this, but it's fabulous. I mean, I like it. I get it. But I just think that we lost I think it was stressful because teachers really do go into that profession to help kids. They want to help mold the next generation. And I just think when we don't even know what's going on, it was really hard. And there was so much, and now particularly, and I don't personally believe that we'll see the mental health effects of this for at least another 10 years. I really think that this is going to be a longitudinal study. We're going to see that when we're, you know, in our 60s or something, they'll be like, look at the effects of the pandemic on this generation. Because right now we're seeing the effects, but we've just started, you know, like we're just now seeing some of the effects. And it's like for the teachers to adjust to those effects now too. So we're asking even more of our teachers, which we've already asked so much, you know, even before COVID, their nurses, their parents, their coaches, their teachers, they're all of these things, and they don't get enough credit for that. And now we're asking them to be counselors and emotion regulators and therapists. And it's like, we're asking too much. And so of course they're stressed. And I just want to put that out there that if there's a teacher listening to this, like you have my support and you're seeing, I mean, I see it and hear it every day. So
yeah, it's a lot. And we're asking to do more on teachers, but you know, now that we're pretty much all back to the classroom, yes, the digital barrier has been removed, but we're, as you mentioned, I mean, there was this funny. There's this one kid. Every weekend I go into Dunkin' Donuts and get my wife a cappuccino blast. That's her treat. She's expecting. So actually, even if she wasn't expecting,
I was going to say, I don't know if anybody orders that, but
right. We keep the cappuccino blast alive. That's just in our family alone. And they kind of know me now because they're like, oh, this is cappuccino blast guy. And I was talking to one kid, and yeah, I was always in high school as a junior, and he's like, yeah, well, you know, my first year was virtual. And I was like, oh my God, your first experience in high school was on Zoom.
It was virtual, yeah.
And my first experience, my freshman year of high school was so important because it wasn't the best year, but it was so foundational. And that is a very it's an important thing. And as you said, we're going to see these effects more and more as time goes on. So let's talk a little bit about some of the things that you're now seeing when you go speak with students and you go work with a high school. And, you know, now do you obviously are a speaker. Do you do any small group coaching, like maybe 20 or 30 kids, or is it more so speaking and then one-on-ones? It's
mostly just like full school assemblies or teen conferences. I don't go into the school all the time, like a lot, as much as I do like conferences, because
right.
What I like about the teen conferences is there's multiple schools there, like sometimes 10 or, you know, around that number, and they take these messages back to their schools, which is what I find really valuable, like infiltrating. So
yeah. With that being said, if you've had the opportunity to, and if you don't have to be now, but you know, in your last, say, 5 years, you know, kind of pre-COVID and post-COVID, what are some of these issues that teens are dealing with? Like, what is it specifically? What are maybe some of the top 2 things that you've found that are most common?
Well, what I love about, I recently went to a youth leadership conference in Florida, and I got to do a workshop where I actually sat down. It was about 45 students and all different schools across the country, like all across the country. And,
nice.
You know, I had this whole presentation planned, and we got in there, and I was just right when everyone was coming in, you know, right like about 5 minutes before the presentation starts, you know, all these breakout sessions are happening. I'm listening to these conversations of these students that are coming in, and they're just saying to each other, like, I'm so excited to be here. Like, my anxiety's been through the roof, or this is the message I've been needing to hear. Like, I'm so excited for this message. And so I was like, I'm throwing an audible. We are completely scrapping this presentation, and we're going to sit in a circle, which we did. We moved all the chairs in a circle, and I said, look, the thing that I hear the most is that your generation wants to talk about mental health. So let's just talk about it. So I created this kind of environment of, this is totally led by you. We're just going to sit down and have this conversation, because that's what mental health needs to be, is a conversation, not somebody up here preaching to you, or, no, I want to hear from you. Let's hear from each other. Let's connect. And it was so incredibly amazing and just uplifting. I mean, we all were crying. We all were laughing. I mean, it was just this opportunity for them to feel seen and heard. And what I have seen there is what I see everywhere. Anxiety is the issue that I'm seeing, and that they're talking about, and that they can't get through the door in the morning, or they're people pleasing and they don't know how to set boundaries, or they say yes when they should say no, or they feel pressured to do this, but even though they don't want to. I mean, it's just, or they're stressed about things that are not stress worthy. And not to say that obviously certain things that cause me stress are not going to cause other people stress. And people will say that to me. That's not what I mean. It's these unrealistic expectations that they put on themselves, that they try to strive for. And that if they don't hit it, they feel like they have failed, and that's it, that they're done. It's like, clearly my life is over, or this was not meant for me. They don't know how to course correct. Like, just because this didn't work out doesn't mean this won't. There's so much anxiety, which leads to depression, which leads to just an insurmountable amount of issues. And the issue is that we don't know how to cope with it. But they're young. And I try to explain to them, neurologically, your brain is not yet developed to see past what's happening right now. Like, that doesn't even develop till we're in our, early 20s, right? Like, fully developed. So it's like, there's a bigger picture here, versus what's happening right now. But just even communicating that. So it was really good.
That's amazing. Do you feel like simply having the conversation and teaching them, because that's actually something that I talk about, is that your brains are not even developed. You're probably even to the point a little bit later than that. Is that realization sometimes enough for students to say, like, okay, I'm going to rethink this thing now, and I feel better about my thing that I'm feeling, a specific thing that I'm feeling anxious about now. But then what happens next Friday when something else kind of creeps in? Right. Are they able to use that same thought process, or whatever that may be? Is there a specific strategy that kind of covers it all, or is it kind of really case-by-case situation, and it's more about the conversation and being able to talk to somebody about what they're feeling?
Absolutely. It's just, yes, we can tell them that they're not yet fully able to do that, but even that concept of just understanding that is just going to be hard to grasp at first. The strategies that I believe in are more proactive for that reason. Like, what can we do now every single day to activate that muscle and work on that muscle, that needs to be nurtured to continue to strengthen our mental health, because nothing is a perfect process by any means, but it's not a one-time thing either, right? Like, it has to be a continuous compounded effect over time, that gets us, just like going to the gym, right? It's just one day doesn't do it.
One day, every once in a while, you have a good enough workout where you feel sore and you're like, that's it. I did it.
I know. Look at all these gains.
God. And then the next day you look in the mirror and you're like, damn it.
Guess I'll go back.
So I'm curious, you said, talking about these different situations, is there a more powerful way, something that you can teach tactically, or is it more of a mental strategy, or is it a combination of both?
Both. Oh, absolutely. Both. One of the tactical things that I feel like I leverage with them is creating routines, right?
Oh, that's up my alley. Okay.
Oh my gosh, routines and habits will carry you through and keep you aligned and course correct and back on track and all these things. But, and I tell them, 'cause they're young, right? And they're like, oh, I don't use a planner, or I like to be spontaneous and all this other stuff. And I'm like, you know what I mean? But not, and I tell them, I'm like, this is always an aha moment for them, is I'm like, no routine is a routine. And then I let that hang there for a second. They're like, oh my God. I'm like, because you create habits and routines that you do every single day, whether they're intentional or not. I'm just asking you to create intentional habits and routines, things that support our mental and emotional health versus don't serve us, and when we start to implement, again, with the proactive actions, and we put things in our path that keep us up here, that when we do fall off, we're able to revert back to the things that do bring us joy and get back on track, because we know that those things keep us going.
That is awesome. I'm so happy that you're able to, because there was, some people do believe that the topic of habit building and routine building, because they get that initial backlash of, well, I don't use a planner and I'm spontaneous. I'm a wild teenager. Like, I'm really glad that you're able to implement that, because that's what I've been preaching to everybody, let alone students. But routine building, and forming your own system of routines. That's one of the biggest things that has transformed my life. So I'm really happy to hear that.
Yes.
I want to go back to something you said, unrealistic expectations. Mm-hmm. A while ago, I saw you post something about texting and not getting back to their friends right away. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Oh gosh, boundaries. Unrealistic expectations. This is something I see a lot of people. First of all, it causes me a lot of anxiety. That's how I know it causes other people anxiety.
Right.
But when I coach, and my husband's a teacher, so I've learned a lot about this generation and how they communicate, and that's fine. This is how they communicate. We shouldn't rally against that. We absolutely should not. We should just meet them where they are. I'm a firm believer in that. They communicate differently than we did. We can't change it. This is the way the world is moving. We have to adapt. So, but what I have found is there's a language within their language now of how they communicate, and what insults are, and what fighting is, and things like that, just how they communicate within the way they communicate. What I mean by that is, for example, Snapchat is a huge thing with young people today. And if you don't read them, or you leave them unread, is what they say,
right,
that's insulting. That is considered a massive insult to them. So when I talked about it, and I'm talking about setting boundaries, is we have these unrealistic expectations of what it means to get back to somebody via text or Snapchat or messaging. And just because someone messages us initially does not mean that we have to get back to them. But there's guilt on both sides of that, right? Like, I feel bad for not getting back to you. You're making me feel bad for not getting back to you, so I should get back to you. And I'm just like, this is stressing me out just talking about it. Right. So really, when I have spoken to groups before about setting the do not disturb on your phone, and just coming to that realization that, like, we could talk about boundaries for so long. I don't know. There's no specific way to land on this other than we are not obligated to give somebody 24 hours of our time. We're not obligated to give them all of our energy. Protecting your mental health is about protecting your energy. And if you're just giving it away and not restoring it for yourself or protecting it, then there's ownership that needs to be taken on that side of this mental and emotional struggle, which is a whole other topic we could talk about, of ownership. These podcasts are just not long enough for that. Right. So they're just not. But that was probably one of the best things I ever did for my mental health. Was
so you're talking about, when you say ownership, you're talking about the ownership of how you're feeling. So if somebody else is feeling upset that that other person didn't answer their text, like that's they need to own how they're feeling.
Right. We have to really start to look at what's a them problem and what's an us problem.
Ooh, I like that.
So, for example, if a friend is mad that I didn't get back to them, that's a them problem, not a me problem. It's absolutely not my problem that you're mad that I didn't get back to you. Sounds like you have insecurities that you need to work on. Or you believe that I'm the type of friend that would just deliberately neglect you. Instead, you're not the friend that says, oh, I'm sure she's just busy, or she'll get back to me when she can. Why are you not that way? Like, and I'm not like questioning somebody's personality. I'm just saying we should not take on the guilt of, oh my God, I hurt their feelings. I feel terrible. Why do you feel terrible?
Right. Now, is that them saying feeling terrible? Is that sometimes, do you feel like with certain students, not necessarily really how they feel, but that's their version of being polite, or somewhere in the middle?
Well, then we could talk about people pleasing and what that means.
Right.
I mean, there's so many different ways that we can go with this, but
this is what you're seeing.
Yes, and when we allow people to have control over our emotions or take up that kind of mental real estate in our mind, then that's where we need to own it. We are allowing that to occur. Yeah. So what needs to happen? So I would then be like, what you need to do is sit your friend down and have a conversation with them. You need to just tell them, because if people don't know how we're feeling, then that is also something of ownership, right? So when people are like mad because I'm not responding to them, right, I can't just assume that they wouldn't be mad. Like, I can't assume that they know that I'm busy or that I'm setting these boundaries. So to communicate that is really important. Not apologize for your boundaries, right? Because we don't want to apologize for the boundaries that we're setting, but we can communicate, hey, like, I just want to let you know, like, this is how I protect my energy. It is nothing personal. So if I don't get back to you right away, just know that it's probably because I don't have my do not disturb on and I need to, like, protect my energy. But I'll get back to you when I click into it. And then if they take it personally...
Now it's funny because I think about this and I think about these, 16, 17, 18-year-olds are soon going to be 26, 27, 28-year-olds before we know it. And I wonder how much of this will become part of the insertion. Now I'm going kind of off. I'm just kind of spitballing here. I wonder how much of this is going to become the growth of technology. For instance, so my dad, for the longest time, actually, you know what? I don't even he still thinks he has call waiting on his home phone. There are two things I just said here that younger students right now, if they did listen to this, they'd be like, what is any of that? So he has a cell phone, never uses it. So I call him on his house phone, and it's been so long that I don't really speak to him much, but like, I don't think either way, when he would take, what would he do? He would take the phone off the hook when he got remarried. He has when he had a little boy, when he was napping. And I understand that. And then, for instance, if I leave a message on his home phone, and he doesn't get back to me for like, a week or something, I wonder, that to us seems like, now I'm not maybe going to take offense to that, but it may seem like, I wonder if he's okay, because that's the time frame where it's like, and this is different for everybody, It could be one day, it could be 1 week, it could be 1 year. But that's like the time frame and the use of technology that to you and I, we're like, oh, is everything okay? What's going on? Did I do something? Right.
A week is a while.
Right. Well, that's all another conversation. But I wonder how much technology is going to change students and then soon adults' way of responding. Because even still to us, I mean, if I text somebody, I have a buddy of mine who I'll text him and his boundaries are set. And I know that. Like, I'm very well aware of that. But throughout my life, I wasn't always, I want to say, for lack of a better word, mature as I am now. And I would be like, dude, what the hell, man? Come on, like, pick up your phone. Like, and it's just very interesting. So I'm very curious about that, because again, this thing is just like, it just is really changing everything. So I'll get off my Star Trek soapbox here, but so I'd like to kind of start wrapping up here with a question here. And for the teachers who are listening to this, I'm curious, is there something specific that they can instill in their classroom? Because let's face it, a secondary teacher has approximately 40 minutes from the time the kids walk in, time kids walk out to do something that week, right? And if there's an assembly one day of the week, and they get pulled out, half the kids for a band rehearsal, the other period, like it's like there's the whole week, right?
Yeah.
What can they do that's maybe more tactical, considering that we probably don't have the time to open up and have a whole group discussion about how they're feeling, more tactical to instill consistency in these type of positive mental frameworks and positive mental health strategies? Is there anything tactical that they can kind of just implement? Maybe something, I don't know if your husband does something like that, or if you've seen other teachers do something. And if not, if you don't have anything, I'm curious if we can think of something, kind of on the fly.
Well, I do believe in meeting kids where they are, like I said, and because I've experienced this a lot with my husband, because we're just different personalities. I'm the type of person, because of just everything. If I see a student struggling, plus it could also just be the counselor in me, I just walk directly up to them. I'm like, what's wrong? Like, tell me what's going on. Clearly something's going on. But for teachers, there's just no time for that. There's no, not that there's not time for that. It's just, gosh. There's just so much. So,
well, and I think to your point, I think there's very limited time, because they're putting so much pressure from the state to then hit these metrics that are, again, another conversation for another day, but.
Right. And I've often told my husband, I'm like, you should just have like this, this is something I've just suggested to him just from my own experience with him and what he's dealt with in his classroom, is you should just let students know that, if they're struggling or if they need to talk or something like that, that they can write anonymous notes to you and just put them on your desk or put them somewhere where you can find them. And then you can always direct that if needed to somebody else, or, but there's got to be a way. There has to be a way. And I do believe in being proactive. So I know that, and I've thought about this before, like school physicals, for example. You have to have a school physical to attend school, especially if you're coming in as a freshman. I know you have to have your freshman physical, at least in the state of Illinois. That's a thing that they have to do. I don't know if that's state or nationwide anyway, but you have to play sports. I know that. Okay. So There's a lot of different ways that students are required to see a physician to make sure that they are healthy. They have all these things. Nowhere in any of these physicals, at least in the state of Illinois, do we ask about their mental health. We do not do that here. How come we get physical checkups, but we don't get mental health checkups?
Wow.
Think of before we even get to school, and the teacher has to discover that they're struggling, the counselor has to discover that they're struggling. They have already had this conversation with a mental health professional before they go to school. How come we don't do that?
That is, for all you administrators out there, that's a real interesting conversation.
That's part of the stigma, is people think we go get checkups physically all the time, for our eyes, our teeth. If something happens, if we break a bone, if we're not feeling well, how come when we don't feel well, or before we don't feel well, we don't go get our mental health checked on?
And with that question, I think that's just a great place, because that is, gosh, that's such a great framework. I'm so happy we had you on.
The only time I have ever been asked about my mental health, I actually pointed out to the physician. It was just recent years. I went for some regular, I don't even know, blood draw. I don't know. It was so weird. And they were just the only thing they asked me at the end was how are you feeling? Do you need to talk to someone? And I'm like, what do you mean? I literally asked, I was so confused. I was like, I'm fine. I'm physically fine. And they're like, no, do you have negative thoughts about harming yourself? That was their question. And I was like, no, but thank you for asking. But I don't know if I'd lead with that. And I just said that, I was like, there's so many other questions you could have asked that are still mental health struggles that are not at that caliber yet.
Because they go
they
go right
just
to
went
the end.
right there.
Right.
Just skipped over any mental breakdowns, any panic attacks, anxiety attacks. Can you sleep at night? Are you eating well? There's so many different questions that could have been asked, but it was just let's just go straight there. Because that's when you need help, right? But it just was no, let's stop it before. Again, proactive. Why are we so reactive? we're too reactive. I mean,
well, because I think that we don't want to. The stigma, since the stigma is there, which hopefully over the next few years we can get rid of that. The stigma is there, therefore we don't even know how to deal with it. We don't want to deal with it until we have to, as a society.
But how else are we? I mean, there's so many we could talk about this. I mean,
of course, and this is why you do what you do. I mean,
it just blows my mind.
Yeah. And you know what? But every time you work with a school district, every time you work at a conference, every time any type of person in the education space that is a decision maker, and here's what you have to say, is a really, really powerful thing, because if we're trying to create better humans and not just other factory workers, we need to create better human beings. And to do that, we need to, create better human beings. So it's going to take more time. It's going to take more revamping the education system, but it's going to take more people like you to doing what you do. So, really from me to you, thank you very much for what you do. Really, really happy to have you on. Brittany, with that being said, tell us where, if someone wants to learn a little bit more about what you do, and how they can kind of get in contact with you, where would they go online to reach out to you?
BrittanyRichmond.com. That's my website. And then there's a, way to contact me there. And then, because Instagram is usually where I hang out with a lot of my students, I provide a lot of different tips and tricks there. It's more of a get to know me and just kind of, because I think a lot of times when students see speakers, at least when I did, it was like, when you're young, you're like, this person is not really human, they're just sitting here telling me their story and then they're leaving. Like, I'm never going to see them again. It's like, building that relationship with students is really important to me. So my Instagram is the Brittany Richmond. So anything with Brittany Richmond, you're going to find me there. So it's fine.
Love it. Well, Brittany Richmond, thank you so much for being on the show. Really such a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you for having me. It was wonderful.
So thanks so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Brittany. She is awesome. She's such a firecracker. I really enjoyed our chat, and I enjoyed our shared experience in the education world, which was great. If you want to learn more about Brittany, you can get over to BrittanyRichmond.com. That's BRTTANY Richmond.com. Also, definitely check her out on Instagram, because I feel like she's a social superstar. She's got such great content, and she's really got some awesome 80s hairband t-shirt collections, which is really cool. So head over to the Brittany Richmond on Instagram. Thank you so much for listening. If you like today's episode, please definitely share it with another teacher that needs to hear it. And if you really liked it, let me know by leaving a rating and review. That will help me tremendously become a better host. And of course, it'll help more people find the show. So thank you so much, and I'll see you next week on the Upgrade My Classroom podcast.